What happens when a self-made millionaire CEO's empire of control and perfection begins to crumble because of one woman's unexpected connection with his most dangerous rival? Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. The sound of the elevator doors opening was a silent announcement of Jackson Blackwell's arrival. He stepped out onto the polished marble floor of Blackwell Enterprises with a confidence that was both commanding and suffocating. At 42, Jackson had built an empire from nothing, a legacy forged in the fires of his ambition and calculated moves. His perfectly tailored suit, dark as the night, highlighted his broad shoulders, and his steely blue eyes scanned the room with a cold precision that could freeze anyone in their tracks. This was his world. Jackson didn't need to say much to be heard. His presence alone was enough to make people pause, adjust their posture, and make sure their words were carefully chosen. He had earned his reputation as a ruthless, self-made billionaire with a mind that could cut through any challenge, any opponent. Emotions? He didn't have time for those. They were weaknesses, liabilities in the world of business. The glass walls of his penthouse office afforded a sweeping view of the city below. He could see everything. His control extended far beyond the company's towering headquarters, through every contract, every deal, every calculated risk he'd ever taken. It was this control that had allowed him to build Blackwell Enterprises into the powerhouse it was today. And yet, despite all of that, despite everything he had worked for, there was something about Lana Parker that had started to throw him off balance. Lana, the rising star in the marketing department, had made her mark quickly. In her early 20s, she was sharp, ambitious, and had a natural talent for brand strategies that had already turned heads in the industry. She was the type of person who didn't wait to be noticed. She made sure to be seen, effortlessly charming with a perfect balance of confidence and intellect. She didn't need to be anyone's favorite. She simply got the job done. But what had started as a professional admiration began to stir something else in Jackson, a feeling he couldn't quite name. His eyes followed her as she moved through the bustling office. She was seated at her desk, her back straight, every movement deliberate as she worked. Her auburn hair cascaded neatly over her shoulders, and her sharp green eyes were focused on the screen in front of her, lost in her thoughts. She didn't look up when he entered, but Jackson noticed the subtle shift in the room, the way people seemed to breathe a little more slowly, the quiet shift in attention. This wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that Lana didn't give him the respect he was accustomed to. She wasn't fawning over him like the others. She didn't smile too wide or laugh too eagerly at his occasional dry humor. She simply met his gaze when necessary, responded to his directives with professionalism, and moved on. There was a certain intensity in the way she carried herself that had started to occupy more of his mental space than he cared to admit. Today, as he stepped into his office, his mind wandered back to the project he had seen her working on last week. It was a branding campaign for a new product, a major deal. He had been impressed with how she had handled herself in the meeting, offering bold yet grounded suggestions that surprised even him. But it wasn't just her work that had caught his attention. It was the way she had dealt with Vincent Knight. Jackson's fist clenched at the mere thought of Vincent Knight, the CEO of Knight Enterprises and Jackson's fiercest rival for the past decade. Vincent was ruthless in a different way, charismatic, calculating, and willing to bend rules that Jackson would never dare break. Their companies had clashed before, and Vincent had always seemed to be just one step ahead, a constant thorn in Jackson's side. And now it seemed Vincent had set his sights on Lana Parker. The first time Jackson saw them together, talking and laughing as if they were old friends, something inside him shifted. Lana had been discussing the rebranding campaign with Vincent during a break in the meeting. Jackson watched from a distance, but what he saw wasn't just a business conversation. The ease with which they interacted, the chemistry between them. He didn't like it, not one bit. Lana had been unaware of the history between the two CEOs. Vincent's charm was effortless, and he had a way of making everyone around him feel like they were the most important person in the room. But Jackson knew better than to trust Vincent. He had tried to steal from Jackson before, nearly ruining him in a hostile takeover attempt that left a bitter taste in Jackson's mouth. Vincent's presence in the office didn't just challenge Jackson professionally. It challenged his carefully controlled world. And when Vincent made it clear that he intended to build a stronger connection with Lana, Jackson's heart rate increased in a way he couldn't explain. As the day went on, Jackson's mind wandered back to the conversation he had overheard between them in the conference room. It had been light and casual, but the laughter in Lana's voice, directed at Vincent, had struck Jackson in a way he couldn't shake. He had never been one to give in to jealousy. It was a weakness, and Jackson Blackwell didn't deal in weaknesses. But something about Lana made him feel like he was losing control. He couldn't figure out why, but he didn't like it. Not one bit. Later that night, as he walked through the gala at the Meridian Hotel, Jackson felt the same gnawing unease when he saw Lana and Vincent together again. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. But all Jackson could focus on was the image of Vincent's hand lightly resting on Lana's arm as they conversed. She laughed again, the sound warm and genuine, and it sent an uncomfortable jolt of something unfamiliar through Jackson's chest. It was supposed to be a night of business, of networking, of fine wine and careful conversations. But as he made his way across the room, the usual ease he had in these situations vanished. His heart rate increased, his jaw tightened, and for the first time in a long time, Jackson felt completely out of control. When he approached, Lana looked up, her gaze meeting his for a split second, before she quickly turned her attention back to Vincent. But the damage had already been done. Jackson's jealousy was no longer a hidden feeling. It was palpable, it was raw, and it was terrifying. He couldn't stop it. He couldn't suppress it. "Excuse me," he said to the group he had been speaking with, his voice smooth but his eyes hard as stone. He moved toward them with purpose, each step filled with barely controlled frustration. Lana saw him coming, and for the first time, something in her eyes shifted, something unreadable, something that caught Jackson off guard. Vincent noticed him too, of course. Vincent always noticed him. "You two seem to be getting along well," Jackson said, his voice barely hiding the tension underneath. His eyes flicked to Lana, then back to Vincent. The smile Vincent gave him was smooth, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're just discussing business," Vincent said, his tone casual, but Jackson could hear the underlying challenge in his words. Lana's gaze flickered between the two men, clearly uncomfortable with the palpable tension. But Jackson didn't care. He needed to make it clear that she wasn't just a business asset to him. She was his, and no one was going to take her from him. Not if he had anything to say about it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced politeness, but Jackson's eyes never strayed far from Lana. Every time she laughed or exchanged a word with Vincent, his stomach tightened. It wasn't just professional rivalry anymore. It was something far deeper, and he couldn't ignore it. Over the next few weeks, Lana's career trajectory seemed to soar higher with every meeting, every presentation. Her ideas were innovative, fresh, and bold. She had quickly become an invaluable asset to Blackwell Enterprises, and her efforts were finally being recognized. A promotion seemed imminent, and she knew it. Her rise was inevitable, but not without a cost. Her growing influence and her work with Vincent, however, were starting to put her directly at odds with Jackson's vision for the company. Lana's strategies were forward-thinking, more progressive than the conservative route Jackson had always preferred. He found himself increasingly irritated by her suggestions, though he couldn't deny their brilliance. But every time she presented an idea that aligned with Vincent's, it felt like a silent betrayal, a signal that Lana might be leaning toward Knight Enterprises instead of Blackwell. Jackson's frustration only grew when Vincent, ever the opportunist, made his move. "Lana," Vincent's voice was smooth as it echoed in her office, "I've been thinking a lot about your vision for the rebranding. It's bold, and I believe it could change the industry." He leaned against the doorframe casually, exuding the same easy charm he had always used to win people over. Lana looked up, surprised. She wasn't used to Vincent being so direct. "I'm glad you think so," she replied, her voice professional, though a flicker of curiosity crossed her face. "I think you could do even more. Knight Enterprises is expanding, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. We're working on a project that could take your career to the next level, Lana. Think about it. More resources, more influence. I'd be happy to bring you on board as a lead strategist." The offer was tempting. Knight Enterprises was growing at an impressive rate, and Vincent was offering Lana a chance to not just build her career, but dominate it. The idea was so powerful, so alluring, that it made her pause. But there was a voice in her head that quickly reminded her where her loyalties lay. Still, Vincent's words stuck. She knew this was more than just a business deal. It was a challenge to Jackson, to Blackwell Enterprises itself. It wasn't long before Jackson noticed the change. Lana was spending more time with Vincent, meeting for late-night strategy sessions, dinners, and brainstorming. It wasn't just professional anymore. Vincent's charm was working, and Jackson could see it. He could see her becoming more comfortable with him, more eager to please him. At the annual gala, the sight of Vincent standing close to Lana sent a surge of possessiveness through Jackson's chest. He watched them talk, laughing freely, and then Vincent reached out to touch her arm. The casualness of it, the intimacy, felt like a dagger to Jackson's side. That was enough. Later that evening, in the quiet of a dimly lit hallway, Jackson caught Lana alone. His voice was controlled, but his gaze burned with something far darker. "You need to be careful, Lana," Jackson said, his words laced with a cool edge. "Working so closely with Vincent, it's not just business anymore. You're becoming too involved." Lana raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sudden shift in his tone. "Jackson, what are you implying?" she asked, a touch of annoyance creeping into her voice. "I'm saying that you're being too trusting. You don't know what Vincent's true intentions are." His voice was smooth but urgent. Lana met his gaze, her own eyes flashing with defiance. "I'm doing my job, Jackson. This is business. I don't need you interfering in my career." The words stung, and for a moment, Jackson didn't know what to say. Her dismissal of his concern cut deeper than he'd expected. She wasn't just disagreeing with him, she was brushing aside everything he had tried to protect. Back in his office, Jackson stood staring out at the city skyline, his fists clenched. Was he really worried about the company? Or was it something else entirely? The truth was that the fear gnawing at him had little to do with business. It was the undeniable ache of jealousy, something he had never allowed himself to feel, much less admit. But it was real, and it was consuming him. He wasn't just afraid of losing her as an employee, he was afraid of losing her, period. And that was the part of himself he was too terrified to face. The tension reached its peak during a critical business meeting the following week. Vincent had put forward a proposal to work closely with Knight Enterprises. It was a bold move, one that could help her climb to new heights in her career. But as Lana defended the proposal, Jackson could feel his control slipping. She was siding with Vincent. The raw frustration bubbled to the surface as Jackson's voice grew sharper. "This isn't the way forward, Lana. We can't risk putting all our eggs in Vincent's basket." Lana's eyes narrowed and the room went quiet. "It's not just about risk, Jackson. It's about growth. You've been too focused on protecting what we have. Sometimes we need to take a leap." Her words cut through him, but the truth was, he didn't know how to let go. He had spent his entire life building an empire, and now the one person who had cracked through his icy exterior was slipping away. As the meeting ended and the room cleared, Jackson was left standing alone, his thoughts swirling. He wasn't just afraid of Vincent's influence, he was afraid of losing Lana to him. And the realization hit harder than any business deal ever could. He had tried to control everything, but now the one thing he couldn't control was the one thing that mattered most. And that terrified him. The air was thick with tension in the sleek, glass-walled conference room. The potential investors, all sharp suits and calculating eyes, watched silently as Jackson leaned over the polished wooden table. The numbers on the projector flashed, but Jackson's mind was elsewhere. His gaze kept flickering between Vincent and Lana, who were sitting side by side. Vincent's plan was solid, too solid for Jackson's liking. Vincent had made it clear, Knight Enterprises was ready to offer something Lana couldn't ignore. The stakes of this business meeting were higher than ever, and Lana's words, usually so confident and commanding, seemed to be swaying in Vincent's favor. Jackson couldn't allow that, not now, not when his entire world was already off balance. As the discussion continued, Jackson's frustration mounted. His grip on the edge of the table tightened. Every word Vincent spoke felt like a challenge, a silent competition between the two of them for Lana's loyalty. And that was when he did it. Something he'd never done before in public. "Forgive me, Vincent," Jackson interrupted, his voice as cold as steel. "But this plan simply doesn't align with what we've discussed as a company. It's far too risky and doesn't ensure long-term sustainability for our shareholders." Lana's head snapped toward him, her expression one of shock. The room went still, the investors sensing the tension, but no one spoke. Vincent's jaw tightened, his hands folding in front of him as he held Jackson's gaze, a challenge silently exchanged between them. "Mr. Blackwell, perhaps you're overlooking the bigger picture here. The market is changing, and our focus needs to shift if we're to stay competitive." "Not at the cost of our current standing," Jackson shot back, his tone biting. "This proposal, Vincent, is an invitation to disaster." The words hung in the air, leaving a bitter aftertaste. It was clear to everyone in the room that Jackson wasn't just questioning the business deal. He was challenging Vincent's very authority in front of the people who mattered most. The investors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of where the fault lines truly lay. After a strained silence, Lana finally spoke, her voice firm, yet laced with disbelief. "Jackson," she said, her eyes narrowing as she looked directly at him, "this is unprofessional. You've just undermined Vincent's proposal in front of everyone." Her words stung, but Jackson didn't flinch. "I did what was necessary for the company." "No," Lana replied, her anger rising. "You did what was necessary for your ego. And now you've jeopardized my career." Her voice was sharp, and the accusation hit harder than he expected. He had done everything in his power to protect the company, and in doing so, he had sabotaged the one thing he couldn't control, his feelings for her. That evening, the confrontation that had been brewing for months finally exploded. Lana stormed into Jackson's office, her face flushed with anger. "You've crossed a line, Jackson. I've worked hard to get where I am, and now you've done everything in your power to make sure I fail." Her voice trembled with frustration, but the words spilled out like venom. "Lana, Jackson began, but she cut him off. "No! You've been undermining me at every turn because of what? Some misguided sense of control? Or is it because I'm working with someone you see as a threat?" Her breath hitched as she tried to control her emotions, but the accusation was clear. She saw through him, and it terrified him. "I'm not—" His words faltered, and for a moment Jackson seemed lost. The mask he had worn for so long cracked. The tension that had been simmering inside him broke free. "I'm not worried about the business deal, Lana. I'm worried about losing you. I'm afraid of losing you to him, to anyone else." Lana froze, her anger giving way to confusion. "What?" Jackson's shoulders slumped as he walked to the window, looking out at the city below. The silence between them stretched thin. "I can't keep pretending this isn't affecting me. I can't keep pretending you're just an employee. I've tried, God knows I've tried. But you're more than that to me. And I'm terrified of losing you." His voice was raw, a side of him she had never seen before. It was vulnerable, honest, and completely unguarded. For a long time she just stared at him, processing the weight of his words. Lana's heart raced, but she didn't know how to respond. Her mind whirled with conflicting thoughts. She had always focused on her career, had always believed that her future was carved out in hard work and dedication. Jackson was part of that. He had been her mentor, her guiding force, but now everything was changing. Her growing attraction to him had been undeniable, but now the truth was out. And then there was Vincent, her ally, the one who had always believed in her potential, the one who had given her the freedom to explore her ideas and build something meaningful. She was torn. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice betraying the emotions she had been keeping in check. "This changes everything." Jackson's eyes softened, the hard edge of his facade cracking. I know I've messed everything up. But I'm not asking you to choose now. I'm just asking for a chance to explain. To stop pretending this is just business." Lana stood there, caught between the man she was slowly falling for and the career she had spent years building. "I don't know if I can make that choice," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Jackson took a deep breath, his voice trembling with unspoken emotion. "Then let me make it for both of us. Let me prove to you that I'm not just trying to control everything. Let me prove that I can be more than the CEO. Let me prove I can be the man you need." Lana didn't know what would come next, but for the first time, the decision wasn't about business. It was about the future, her future, and what role Jackson would play in it. The grand ballroom of the Blackwell Enterprises annual gala glittered with gold and crystal. Guests mingled in tailored suits and elegant gowns, champagne flutes in hand, all speaking in hushed tones about the year's successes. It was the highlight of the company's social calendar, a night of celebration, prestige, and polished facades. But for Jackson, tonight was something else entirely. His eyes were locked on one woman, Lana. She stood across the room, radiating confidence and elegance in a deep emerald gown that seemed to capture every light in the room. Her auburn hair was swept into a soft updo, allowing the delicate curve of her neck to shine, and her makeup was subtle yet perfect. She was captivating. Every step she took seemed to draw the attention of every man in the room, and Jackson couldn't help but feel the tightening in his chest. But it wasn't just her beauty that unsettled him. It was Vincent. Vincent, ever the opportunist, had taken a deliberate step toward Lana as soon as she arrived. They were talking now, their heads leaning in close as they exchanged words, their laughter too natural, too comfortable. Jackson could feel the tension rising in his chest as he watched. He knew Vincent, knew how charming and persuasive he could be. And tonight, The stakes felt even higher. Lana had become more than just an asset to the company. She had become a source of turmoil in Jackson's life. Vincent had noticed her, and now she was allowing him to inch closer, inch by inch, not just in business, but in ways that felt dangerously personal. As Vincent's hand brushed against Lana's arm, just a light, casual touch, it felt like a spark of something far more than professional camaraderie. Jackson's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening so hard it almost hurt. His blood began to boil as his mind filled with dark thoughts. How could she be so free with him? The cold, calculated CEO side of him wanted to shut it down, wanted to storm across the room and take control. But the man side of him, the one he tried so desperately to hide, couldn't bear it. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her. His control slipped, just for a moment. That was all it took. Jackson's footsteps were sharp, deliberate, as he made his way through the crowd, his gaze never leaving Lana and Vincent. The air felt thick, suffocating, and everything seemed to move in slow motion as he crossed the distance between them. Lana looked up, meeting his gaze just as he arrived, and her eyes flickered with something like recognition, maybe even guilt. But before she could speak, Jackson was already standing in front of them, the edge in his voice unmistakable. "Lana," he said, his tone clipped, betraying the anger he couldn't suppress. "Vincent." The two exchanged quick glances, and then Lana stood there, silent, her posture stiffening, no doubt aware of the storm that was brewing. "I don't know what this is, but it needs to stop," Jackson continued, his voice growing more forceful. "Lana isn't just some business deal to be passed around. She's mine, and I won't let you take her from me." The room seemed to freeze, every conversation dying in the wake of Jackson's outburst. The clink of champagne flutes, the laughter, the whispers, all vanished. Lana's eyes widened, her lips parting as she took in what he had just said. Jackson could feel the weight of the stares from every direction, but it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered now was Lana. He turned to her, his anger mixing with desperation. "Lana, you know this isn't just business. You know what I feel for you, and I can't stand by and watch this happen." Vincent, ever the calm one, took a step back, his smile a little too knowing. But it was Lana's reaction that held Jackson's full attention. She was trembling, her face a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something else. Hurt. "Jackson." Her voice was barely a whisper, her eyes darting between him and Vincent. Her breath caught as she seemed to process his words, the intensity of the moment sinking in. For a brief moment, Jackson thought she might say something, but instead she looked away, turning her attention to Vincent, then back to Jackson. "What do you expect me to say, Jackson?" The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "This is ridiculous. You're my boss, and this isn't about me. This is about business. Don't make it personal." Jackson's eyes flashed. He reached for her hand, pulling her closer, his frustration getting the better of him. "It is personal, Lana. This is about us, about me not being able to stand by and let you go, not to him, not to anyone." The rawness in his voice made something inside her shift. But before she could respond, the realization hit her. Jackson wasn't just protecting his company, he was fighting for her. And it wasn't just a battle of business, it was a battle for her heart. Lana's heart raced. She was torn. The power dynamics, the business, the professional roles, they all collided in this moment, and she was left with a decision that could change everything. Would she risk it all for him? Would she risk her career, everything she had built, for a man who hadn't just controlled his company, but her too? Her mind screamed at her to take a step back, but in her chest something else stirred, a fluttering she couldn't deny, and she knew in that instant that she couldn't go back to the way things were. The days following the gala passed in a blur of meetings, distractions, and the weight of the decision that Lana could no longer avoid. She spent sleepless nights replaying the confrontation in her mind, Jackson's confession, his raw vulnerability, and his desperate plea for her to choose him over everything else. It had been days since their argument, and each time she thought about him, she felt torn between the life she had worked so hard to build and the growing feelings she couldn't ignore. Vincent had been a constant presence, a mentor, and a business partner she trusted. Yet Jackson was different. His words echoed in her mind. "I can't stand the thought of losing you." The sincerity in his eyes, the way he had opened up to her, left her questioning everything. And now, Jackson stood before her, ready to offer her the impossible choice. "I don't expect an easy answer, Lana." Jackson's voice broke through her thoughts as he sat across from her in her office, his gaze never leaving hers. "But I need you to decide. You can have the deal with Vincent, the one that could change everything for you. But it comes with a cost. You have to choose me, Lana. Choose us." Lana's heart raced. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about her future, her heart. The walls she had built for years to protect herself from emotional chaos felt like they were crumbling with every word Jackson spoke. He continued, his tone softer but no less intense. "I won't stand in your way. If you want to pursue this partnership with Vincent, go ahead. But don't pretend like it's just business. It's not. You've become more to me than just an employee." She wanted to fight back, to tell him he had no right to make such a demand. But his words pierced through her defenses, and deep down, she knew what she had to do. It wasn't about Vincent. It wasn't about the deal, or her career, or the ambitious plans she'd set for herself. It was about Jackson. Lana had spent so much time focusing on her professional growth, believing that her ambition defined her worth. But the truth was, it had come at the cost of her happiness. She had pushed people away, buried her own feelings, and tried to convince herself that success was all that mattered. But in the end, the real success, the kind that made life worth living, came from taking risks, from embracing love, even when it felt terrifying. From choosing Jackson, the man who had made her feel things she'd never allowed herself to feel before. Lana took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Jackson's, and for the first time she allowed herself to speak the truth. "I choose you, Jackson. I choose us." Her heart pounded as the weight of her decision settled over her. It wasn't just a career move, it was a leap of faith. Jackson's face softened, a mixture of relief and something deeper flickering behind his eyes. He stood and walked toward her, the distance between them closing with each step. His presence filled the room, and for the first time, Lana didn't feel the need to resist. "I'll never let you go, Lana," Jackson whispered, his voice hushed but filled with certainty. "Not now. Not ever." Lana's hand trembled as she reached for his, their fingers intertwining in a simple yet profound gesture of trust. They had both spent years building their lives, their empires, their walls. But in this moment it wasn't about power or control. It was about love. And together they would build something even stronger than before, something that balanced both their personal desires and professional aspirations. As the days passed, Jackson and Lana navigated the complexities of their relationship. Their professional lives intertwined with their personal connection, but they had learned how to balance both. Jackson's empire continued to thrive, his vision expanded by the strength of the partnership they had built.
But more importantly, he had someone by his side who saw him for who he truly was, someone who loved him not for the CEO he projected, but for the man he had become with her. Lana, too, grew more confident. She no longer felt that her career would be compromised by love. Instead, she discovered that vulnerability could coexist with ambition, that love didn't have to come at the cost of success. One quiet evening, as they stood side by side at a company event, Lana felt Jackson's hand slip into hers.
The world around them buzzed with conversation, with the glitter of champagne flutes and laughter. But in this moment, it was just the two of them. Jackson squeezed her hand gently. "We've got this, Lana. Together." And for the first time in a long while, Lana felt a deep, unwavering certainty in her heart. Together, they were unstoppable. What do you think makes a love worth fighting for? Share your thoughts about second chances and the courage to love fearlessly in the comments below. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.